Good evening, my students. I hope you all are staying safe inside and weathering the storm of coronavirus. I'm going to be talking about modern India. And last class, we talked about how the Mughal Empire slowly become the British Empire. Today, the entire class will be focusing on British Empire. And I will be talking about two key characters in the South because in South India we didn't talk much. I'm sure you have watched the videos in the assignment in the earlier about ancient South Indian kings, right? And also Cheras, Cholas, Pandyas, Rajaraja Chola about 1,000 years ago, right? Now we're going to talk about a different king under British Empire and how he rebelled against them. And also the British life. Most of this class will be focusing on the social issues and social way of life and others of the British in India and why they came to India. What did they do in India? All those things. Okay, let's start. And before I start, I want to be familiarize you with South India. Okay, this is South India, and this is Tamil Nadu, right? That's the state I am from. I was born here in the southern tip, and I went to college right here. That's the capital of the state, Chennai. It's one of the four major cities in India. As you know, Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, and Chennai. Okay, and so this is Kerala. This is another state, all right, southern state, and this is Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, four different states. So this is going to be part of our discussion today when we talk about this Indian king, Maharaja. Okay, and so let's talk about that. And I will bring the map again and tell you the characters and stories. Okay, so there was a good soldier named Hyder Ali. Are you able to see this? Okay, Hyder Ali. And he is from Mysore, which is right here, Mysore. Okay, and so Mysore is right there. And he was a soldier who rose up in the ranks to become commander in chief. And after being the commander in chief of the army of Mysore, he became the Sultan. Sultan means the ruler, the king, right? Sultan. And his son, Hyder Ali had a son, a boy named Tipu. Later he was called Tipu Sultan. First name Tipu, last name Sultan. Hyder Ali's son, Tipu Sultan. Okay, and Tipu Sultan was very well educated. His father got him with great tutors, and he was educated in the arts and sciences and religions, various religious studies, and also in the warfare. He was uh, very promising kid from a young age. Okay, now we have to introduce another character, Lord Cornwallis. Does it ring a bell? This character, this name, Lord Cornwallis. Lord Cornwallis is the man defeated by George Washington. That's right, by George Washington in the Battle of Yorktown in America, right? And he was sent back. The British went packing from America. So George Washington defeated him. Lord Cornwallis went to England. You would think the British people are like upset about his failure to succeed in America, but many of them carried him on the shoulders. The blame of losing the war was put on other generals. So Lord Cornwallis was in his prime, in his 40s, and he got another assignment after reaching England, and that assignment is to go to another colony. Yeah, you lost American colony, but now you could go to India, Indian colony. And at the time, it was not taken over by the crown. It was before 1857, right? This we are talking about in the 18th century. America defeated um, Lord Cornwallis, George Washington, and so end of the 18th century. So now he got the assignment to go and and take care of business, military problem in India for the EIC, East India Company, right? The East India Company is still ruling India. And so until 1857, the first war of independence, which we talked about last class, correct? So the Mughals are still there. And so Lord Cornwallis talked with the Prime Minister, then Prime Minister William Pitt, in British Prime Minister, and he said, I don't just want to do military, political power should be also given to me. So I should be appointed as Governor General of India, and then I will go. And so William Pitt gave him the power, and he went to India, went to Chennai, where I went to college. Chennai is one of the 4 major cities. So he went there right after he got off the ship. Okay, he was planning to do an attack. There was no Suez Canal at the time. The Suez Canal was built at 1869. So he has to go a long way from England, all the way through around Africa to India, sail around here. It's a long journey. To withstand the journey for months, when the British started coming to India, it took them 7 months from England to India. Anyway, so he came here, immediately started planning to attack Mysore and take him out. So to attack Mysore, he cannot do it alone because Tipu Sultan is a very good warrior. His father is also Hyder Ali. So what he did, Cornwallis put a tie with the king, Nizam, Hyderabad Nizam. Nizam is spelled Nizam. One second, let me erase this. And so I could. Okay. Nizam. Hyderabad is spelled here. You see it? Hyderabad, yeah, Hy, that one. Yep, you could write it down. Hyderabad Nizam. And this guy is very rich. His land mass that he was ruling is larger than France, right? During World War I alone, one of the Hyderabad Nizams, not the guy which is in power, gave about $1 million for World War I for the British effort. They had so much money. And so the Nizam, Cornwallis put a tie, and then alliance with Marathas. Remember, we talked about Shivaji last class. The Marathas, which is in Bombay area, Maharashtra is the state above, and the Marathas, and tried to create an alliance to wage a war against Mysore Maharaja, Hyder Ali, and Tipu Sultan, his son. Tipu Sultan and Hyder Ali worked their way to talk with them and make sure that they don't come and fight with the British against them. So Tipu Sultan actually went and defeated, almost defeated the forces. And when they were about to be defeated and dislodged from India, the British, by Tipu Sultan, they put a treaty saying like, okay, we'll have a peace and you don't attack us, we won't attack you. And if any of other people attack you or me, we will come, either one of us will come and rescue. But they didn't keep up the treaty. The British didn't keep up the treaty. Treaty is an agreement between 2 sovereign powers. Okay, you and I cannot have a treaty. We could have an agreement, but it's sovereign powers. And so now, Tipu Sultan, I wanted to talk about like 4 R's, just too easy to remember. 4 R's of Tipu Sultan. The first R is religious tolerance. Religious tolerance. He is known for religious tolerance, and he was a Muslim king, as the name suggests, and just like Akbar, right, and Shah Jahan, remember, Jahangir, all these great emperors were tolerant to let Hindus practice and didn't affect the other religion and force them to conversion or anything like that, like Aurangzeb did. So Tipu Sultan was religious tolerant. And another R, I call it as relationship building. He was not just a great soldier, but also good emotional intelligence. He built this relationship between Nizam of Hyderabad and Marathas to make sure they don't join forces with the British. You know, the British always, we talked about divide and conquer. They will divide and conquer, but he didn't let the relationship. Another R I will say, is that how he treated soldiers when they get wounded, right? And rather than being retribution, what I meant is retribution. I'm trying to create ours. Retribution means like vengeance. If soldiers are, of other army are defeated, they could be killed, even if they are getting surrendered. Well, you might think, well, that's not a nice thing. That's norms change now in modern times because of Geneva Conventions and Hague Conventions. But at the time, this is, you're talking about 18th century, they could kill, but he did not. In fact, even when he waged war against the British and the British were wounded, surrendered to him, he will ask his physicians, Tipu Sultan's physicians will be asked to treat even the British soldiers. Isn't that nice? So he didn't have the retribution. And the fourth R is a fascinating, very fascinating one. It's called rocketry. Rocketry. You know the rockets? America, you're like, oh yeah, we have launched rockets to the space, moon during Kennedy time. He set the goal. Kennedy didn't live to go and see it. But we created NASA, bringing many of the Nazi scientists, right? Nazi scientists to create NASA program. And the Nazis created the V1 and V2 rockets, which launched on Great Britain, terrorized Britain with bombing. This is, you're talking about in 20th century, correct? Right. I'm talking about in 18th century that Tipu Sultan had created rockets and used it in battlefield against the British. And the British were petrified to see these rockets flying at them and exploding around them. And later when they will defeat Tipu Sultan. And when they defeated Tipu Sultan and took those rockets and looked at it, they sent them to England, and then those rockets were changed into Congreve rockets. Congreve, by their manufacturing, reverse engineered it, and the British took those rockets, what they did, and used it in the War of 1812. That's right, War of 1812 against the Americans when James Madison was president. They used it in America, and guess what? There was a young poet who was watching the rockets being used in the battle in Fort McHenry, and he wrote a poem which became later Star Spangled Banner. That's right. And that song, that and the rocket's red glare. No, I don't want to sing because it's going to scare you. It's going to be scarier than coronavirus. So I would rather not sing. However, it's a globalization of technology. And so the rockets used by Tipu Sultan is what was later reverse engineered and used in America by the British. That's correct. Anyway, so Tipu Sultan, that are the 4 R's for you to remember. He was hating the British to the core. He even had a mechanical toy of like a tiger attacking a British man, a toy, and that the toy will scream, the British will scream. Tipu Sultan saw himself as a tiger. He was a hunter of tigers and he's a lover of tigers. Don't ask me how could he love and hunt tigers. Well, Teddy Roosevelt was a very big fan of animals and he hunted them too. That's a man of their times. And so Tipu Sultan also improved the economy in his country. There are 3 ways he did, and that was he created silkworm producing places, silkworm by the bugs through that creating silks. And the second one was he brought people from other countries to teach them how to do submerged diving. Remember, there was no oxygen mask and things at the time. Submerged diving into the ocean to go and find pearls. Submerged diving, just you go hold the breath and you go for a minute, 2, and go look for pearls and find pearls. The third one, they improved their economy was through breeding high quality horses, and which was used also for warfare by him. So now the British, when Cornwallis came to India, and then later, when they revoked the treaty, he brought soldiers from Calcutta. Remember the Bengal? There was force, the British, and other places, and brought together thousands of soldiers and elephants, war elephants, and marched towards Mysore. And it was a sight to watch them march. And they went and tried to cross the Kaveri River. Kaveri is spelled as, the river is still there, and it creates dispute between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu politically. Kaveri, in terms of water, Kaveri River. Okay, and the the fort of Tipu Sultan was beyond that river, and so he has to cross it to go and attack the fort. So he first he couldn't do it. He was repelled. The flooding was too much. And there was cartoons in Britain like Tipu Sultan peeing, and that become like a big Kaveri River, and Lord Cornwallis is not able to pass through. And then he recouped and then came and put a siege to the fort and built a tunnel to almost break through the fort. And then Tipu Sultan sued for peace. And you know what Cornwallis did? He asked for half of the Mysore to be given to the British. Very cruel. And asked for modern equivalent of $200 million in cash. And Tipu Sultan gave that as well, gave away half of Mysore. And then as hostages, so that Tipu Sultan won't come and kill or again wage a war against the British, two of Tipu Sultan's sons were asked. And the British had that. They even made a painting of the benevolent imperialism of Cornwallis taking those two kids of Tipu Sultan in England. So they had these children, and so that the Tipu Sultan cannot act again, Lord Cornwallis went back to Great Britain. By the time, the second time, this British again waged war against Tipu Sultan, and in 1799 he was killed in the battle trying to protect his fort, and they found his body in the rubbles in the most vulnerable position of the battlefield. He was fighting along with his soldiers. So very courageous. Even in modern India, Tipu Sultan is considered as a great king who fought for freedom, and there are many documentaries and movies have been made, TV series have been made on Tipu Sultan. Okay, now we're going to move and talk about the social aspects, social history of why the British came to India. I'm not talking about the British East India Company. They came for business profit, right? I'm going to talk about why would young men who leave their families come to India to work for the East India Company. Okay, so we're going to talk about one by one different subjects, themes. I have different themes. If you focus on those themes, you will get an idea on the better idea of the social time and the British, how they saw India, everything. And it's fascinating, so like sociological study. The first one, the reason they came for us, write it down, is money. Yeah. Many of them thought it's like a pagoda tree. You want to get rich, hit it, you will get rich. And some of them thought like, well, there are a lot of princely states, and maybe I could be a mercenary. You know what a mercenary means? Mercenaries are soldiers who would go fight for anyone who will pay them. Mercenaries for mercenaries. Yes, at the bottom, I don't have space. Mercenaries who go and fight for these princely states. So money was a main motivation. And the second is heritage. Heritage, because the family has done, see, remember British ruled India for almost 200 years. And so that, if one generation have done, okay, there's an Indomania, write it down, like India mania, Indomania, Indomania, mania, want to go to India. So what are you going to do? I don't know. I'm going to go to India and work for East India Company as soldier. And so this is what my father did. You know, in heritage, they say Douglas MacArthur's father was a soldier. So Douglas MacArthur wanted to be a soldier like his father. And then his son, he wanted him to be like that. In American uh, analogy I'm giving you. So the British, many of them left because of heritage. The third reason is books. Later British, that they read this great authors, British authors in India, who wrote about India in this uh, mythical land way. One of the books is very famous still, Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book. You probably saw the movie or at least heard of it, right? It's even the little boy acts in it is like Indian, right? So it's because it's an Indian story. All this talking about this wild elephants, tigers, and people. It's like an exotic thing for the British. So many of them wanted to go and live there and get this job. Okay, and the money also goes a long way, because paid in pounds, India is very, very inexpensive at the time, and it's getting expensive now. But at the time, very inexpensive. So many of them left for that. The fourth one is aristocracy. Write it down. So I said money, heritage, books. Right, books made them feel about India, another world they want to go and see. Fourth one is aristocracy. Aristocracy, especially the aristocrats, they are feeling more and more in their homeland. It is changing. Democracy is getting up in England, and so they don't feel like they are higher part of the totem pole. So when they go to India, they could still be a higher in the totem pole. So they wanted to go to India at their offices, higher offices. They didn't go and work as ordinary soldiers, high offices, and so that they could feel superior about themselves. So these are some of the common reasons that the British left Great Britain to go and be in India, which takes a long voyage. As I said, in the beginning, it was like almost 7 months. And Suez Canal, which was built in Middle East, and that changed many things. We'll talk about that. So the next one I want to talk about is, apart from soldiers coming to work for East India Company, missionaries came. Missionaries to, religious missionaries. And they didn't come until 1830, because many of the people in the East India Company, their goal is making money. Their goal is not to convert, proselytize the Indians. Whereas there was a one strong force in the beginning of the 19th century. His name is William Wilberforce. And you're like, who's this guy? This guy is very important in history. He's one of my heroes from history. William Wilberforce, you could check out this trailer or even watch the movie called Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace. That's a story of William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce, I'll say it in a couple of lines, his story, is the man who abolished slavery in England. That's right. He was a member of the parliament who stood against very, very hard battle, because many of the member of parliaments had stakes. By abolishing slavery, they will lose an enormous amount of money, and so they didn't want to. But he made them based on morality, that God created all men equal, and so he's a very religious man, Wilberforce, and he fought for almost decades. He spoke, and he could have become a prime minister, but he chose to stand for what is right, and he didn't get to become a prime minister. But just before he was about to die, British Parliament abolished slavery in England and British colonies. And it took a while, many decades after that, for America to abolish, which is through Lincoln's Emancipation and the 13th Amendment, which in the 1860s. But coming back to William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce wanted Indians to be converted to Christianity from this religion of Hinduism. So many missionaries, so they created, after 1830, they passed a law that allowed missionaries to India. Guess what? Not only British missionaries came from all over Europe, from Portugal, from Swedish Seventh-day Adventist. In fact, one of the schools I studied as a kid from 3rd grade to 7th grade was Seventh-day Adventist English medium school. And Seventh-day churches are even found here. You know which country sent the highest amount of missionaries to India? Guess what? America. That's right. America sent Congregationalist, yes, and Baptist, and many other groups came there. And Europeans and the Indians were perplexed because slavery was practiced in America at the time. And they were practicing slavery but sending missionaries and teaching Christianity about God's grace. So that was paradoxical for some of them. But missionaries came, and their goal was not only to save Indian bodies but also their souls. So they did save some bodies as well, especially in 1919. Have you heard of the flu pandemic, which killed about 50 million people around the world? Okay, 50 million. That's right. Look it up. Flu pandemic. This coronavirus is like nothing compared to that. And in India, millions were dying. So these missionaries created hospitals to help these people who are struggling and in poverty. And so many good hopes they got. And they were able to convert people. Some people felt like, oh, give me healthcare, but not ask me to convert me from Hinduism to Christianity. But they did convert some of them. In fact, one of the missionary hospitals created near my village where I was born. I was born in a missionary hospital. I was actually, my mother was 17, gave birth to me by a dentist who is a missionary from England. Most of the missionaries were women, by the way, and they were hell bent on doing God's work. And so dentists gave childbirth to me, and so this was a missionary hospital which is still there, and they do treat leprosy in many parts of India. They did at the time, and you're surprised, like, leprosy is still there? Yes, it is still there. In fact, I was there last year, and I even visited the hospital and saw patients, leprosy patients, still there. It's just antibiotics, but antibiotics availability is, yeah, totally a different topic. Many of these missionaries felt offended by Hindu worship, especially on the Shiva. We talked about Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, right? Shiva is actually has a, my leg is hurting. Shiva is presented as the lingam, the phalanx. Just Google lingam, 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 and just click on images. And this is Shiva, and it's like, you guys are worshiping the phalanx. How could you do that? Missionaries felt, but many of the missionaries were able to successfully convert to Christianity. The next thing is the job opportunities. The British who came for policemen. That was, in the beginning of 19th century, there was not police, not even in America. It came, I think, in America, 1836 or 40. Boston and New York started creating police. Before that, there was no police. Yeah, surprised to know, right? And so there were many police forces were created in India by the British, but many of the British didn't. It's because it's a lower totem pole. Military is the higher totem pole. So I want to talk about the military army. Most of the army was filled with British officers. So Indians were not given the chance. 4:1 ratio, 4 of them will be British officers. And their life there was, like kings. What do you mean? Like British officer will be shaven in his bed, lying in his bed. Somebody will offer him, would you like a shave? The Indian will offer him, and they will get shaved in the bed before even they roll out of the bed. And they will go hunting, their pastime. India is filled with wildlife, which the British never had such things in their country, tigers, elephants, and they will go hunting. Elephant killing was banned because of the empathic. They didn't feel that with other megafauna like tigers, I guess. Some of them, when they go hunting, army officers, they will hunt up to 100 tigers in a week. That is correct. They decimated the population and killed bison, buffalo, boar hunting, In fact, I've read books which talks about boar hunting as some of the most hazardous ones, because you got to get on the feet. You're not on the horseback and looking, and the boar could charge on you with that, the boars. They come will charge on, they will kill, the shoulder hurt. There were many people died of boar hunting. So hunting is a big pastime. They'll go on. Nobody blamed shooting crocodiles. India didn't have alligators, don't have alligators. Crocodiles, hunting crocodiles. The many of the not the officers, the soldiers, British soldiers in India will spend their money because it goes a long way. They're paid. That money will not go a long way in England, but it went a long way in India. So they will spend it on booze, cigarettes, and occasionally on prostitutes. And then the British soldiers were taught to use doctrine, write it down, doctrine of minimum force. Doctrine of minimum force means that they should not use excessive force. They will try to mitigate a situation even when there's a force is the last resort, but allowed to use it minimum force and resolve it. But that was completely thrown out in the case we'll talk about later. Amritsar 1919 massacre. So until then, and especially after defeating Tipu Sultan, let me have some water. After defeating Tipu Sultan, the military did not have much political campaigns. They did. So they were just chilling. They're relaxing soldiers, and boredom is a big problem. But for military officers, they learned languages. Many of them weren't fluent in the languages, but they learned the languages, and it was helped them in promotions. Okay. Now, write about relationships. I'm talking about opposite sex relationships. Okay, that's a whole topic of subject theme we're going to discuss. We talked about our jobs, right? Army and police. Now we're going to talk about this. BB. This is a word. It's very interesting. The British officers. BB. BB means having concubines. Indian concubines the British officers had. Especially young officers will have an Indian woman when they're young. And British officers don't get married young. They are expected to get married only after 30s. They in fact actually thought Indians are very flesh oriented, which is they marry like in their 16s and 13s. And even though marriages don't consummate early, even if they get married. My grandmother was married to my grandfather. My grandmother was 9, but the marriages don't get consummated until later. So they thought the Indian men were very fleshly, and the British only married after 30. So in their young age, they would have BBs of this Indian woman. Some of these relationships actually become permanent because there was a power dynamics, and the women, subjugated, but the military officers and the Indian woman had a relationship, marriage lifelong. What is not usual, it is English men with Indian women were common, but English women and Indian men were not so common. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? But also British women were less represented, single British women, because most of them, when they get married, they bring the bride here, and they will have babies in India. So there were not many single British women to marry to an Indian woman. What about prostitution? Prostitution, the BB system itself was overlooked by higher British officers because they don't want British men to go in large amount to prostitution. Prostitution, it's not just Indian women doing it, which was high in number, but there was also Japanese and Russians and others who were involved in prostitution. So prostitution in England, if an officer goes, it might set back their career. But in India, no. And another thing, homosexuality, which is, according to one scholar, it was not common. However, it is very taboo in England, right, at the time you're talking about before 20th century. But in in India, they could get away with it. So homosexuality was allowed. Let me drink some more water, and then we'll talk further. Okay, where do this British men live? They live in a bungalow. Bungalow, usually houses outside the city, right? And bungalows, I'll spell it for you, is designed with the circulation of air in mind. Okay, bungalows. And when they get married, they come with their wives and they live in these houses, like 4 5 rooms, 6 rooms, not like fancy mansions. And but they had one thing in abundance, couple of things. One thing, very, servants, because of the money they get paid, they have 6 7 8 servants is normal, right? Even in India now, which is India's fast developing country, the fastest growing economy, as some would say, at least before the coronavirus hit, and servants is easy to have access for even middle class, but not in America, right? You have to be super wealthy to have servants. There, the British soldiers, officers were able to have 6 or 7. The British wives will not even go shopping for vegetables or anything to cook. They won't cook. They don't need to because they had servants who will go and buy that and cook and take care of everything, take care of their children. Isn't that amazing? When I talk about children and food was abundant in an average dinner plate in the British India, they have more abundance than if they are living in England. It's interesting. But the food cuisine, I don't want to go and talk about the cuisine, but there are differences with the spicy food, the curry, and their food, which some of them didn't like the Indian food. I understand. Children, when the British women had their children, those who could afford want to send back their children back to England. That's right, alone through all the way for years to boarding schools so they could learn the British way of life and language and knowledge in England rather than, even though there were schools in India for the British, but they don't want to send it there. But not everybody could afford that, so not everybody did send. Now let's talk about social life. Social life, and I talk about clubs. They had clubs. Club is the center of life. You saw Lagan, the movie, the cricket. They had a club. They will sit there, drink their tea and biscuits. That's where they talk. And even Indians who worked there, the British were perplexed that the Indians will not bring their wives and introduce. Yes. Even Maharaja, you saw in the movie, right, in Lagan, he wouldn't bring his wife and introduce to the British officers because the British, it is normal for introducing each other's wives to the other officers. But for Indians, they wouldn't do that. It's not acceptable in the culture. So they thought it was weird. And write down these 2 words, going native. It's a derogatory term used against the British who were very affectionate with Indians and lived among Indians and followed their Indian way of culture and dressing and even sometimes religion to conversion to Hinduism. So, there were stories of British who felt, oh, this is my world. This is where I'm supposed to be. And I was born to be here. I don't know why I was born in England. And these people, when they convert and become like Indian, wearing Indian dresses, will be calling going native. And it was not appreciated at all. In fact, that's a derogatory term. What about artist, intellectual pursuits, and sports? Let's talk about that. That's the next theme. Art, intellectual pursuit, and sports. When it comes to writing, there were books, authors were writing books. However, not so famous until later. Rudyard Kipling, we talked about Jungle Book. E.M. Foster wrote The Passage to India. And there are many other writers who, Jim Corbett, one of my favorites, he wrote about tigers, and it's fascinating. You should check it out. I already talked about hunting, and I will talk about hunting again soon. And now, Jim Corbett is somebody who hunted tigers and wrote about it. And so, artists, you can make a living as a British man as an artist, like a performing artist, because you don't get much audience for it. So they won't. However, when Suez Canal was built, 1869, professional actors from England will take the transportation and come to India and perform for certain time and then go back. That was normal. So many of the British officers were into this macho image of athleticism more than the intellectual pursuit, even though they went to good schools and things. They are soldiers. So sports was a big one. And you can you guess what sports? Yeah, I know. If you watched Lagan, you are thinking of cricket. Yes, cricket is the biggest game in India, but it is not just cricket was played. In fact, football was the game of the many of the cantonments. Remember, the clubs have cantonments. You saw in the movie, and clubs have cantonment is like the military barracks, soldiers where they stay, and the British soldiers stay there. They played football, and the Indians chose to play hockey, field hockey. My dad actually played field hockey. It's not ice hockey. So field hockey is like without ice. You're playing hockey. You don't have a puck. You have a ball, and you play and was practiced. Cricket was observed, played by the British. They didn't teach in Indians cricket. It was observed, just like the movie you saw. They observed it and picked it up. In this movie case, it was for contest. But let me put it this way: the young prince of the Maharajas, right? They're right behind the Maharaja, next to take throne. These princes actually adopted cricket to India. It's quite the opposite in England. In England, it was a rural game which become very famous, but in India, it's urban. It's started urban. Now, if you go anywhere, even in villages, it's played. So the cricket was a big, and one of them even said, cricket is going to be a big game. Indians are going to be a really good teams. Yes, and India is a very powerful team in current cricket. They're like world champions. Now let's talk about what they do other than sports. Fishing and hunting. I already talked about hunting tigers. They go for in elephant backs. There will be like 10, 20 elephants. They will sit in the elephant and go looking for tigers. They will surround them and sit there and shoot the tigers. It's sad. There is a no beast more severe. I think it's titled. If you type Champawak, then beast in Amazon, it'll come. This is a tiger, like Champ Walk. This is a book I just recently read like a year ago, and this is a tiger which killed about 450 to 53 people. It's a man eater. That's right. There were many man eaters in India. You know why? I learned in the book. I didn't know man eaters why it was created. Tigers usually like to kill wildlife, deer, and other things and eat. But when these humans go hunting and hurt those tigers, but didn't kill them by accident, hurt them because they're trying to kill, but they get shot in the teeth or in the leg or anywhere, they become weak. They can't hunt the prey, which is agile. So they need to eat. They become hunters of human beings because humans are easy prey. And here's the thing, we talked about the War of First Independence, 1857. In the War of 1857, when the rebellion happened, right after that, the throne took over power, they disarmed Indians. They disarmed. They cannot have guns or not even any big, strong weapons, machinery or anything. Because of that, they become very vulnerable to these man-eaters. They wouldn't have anything to defend against this beast. So they have to call for a British officers, and the shikaris come there to hunt these tigers. Sometimes there are too many things to go around to come and do the job. Before that, the tigers will go on a rampage killing people. And this book, which I mentioned, a British officer who comes and kills. You could talk about the hunting of the tigers and the killing, the methods, the prey they use. All this itself is like a whole lecture. But let's not go there. But it is to give you an understanding of what the British officers did in terms of hunting tigers. In India's national animal is a tiger, by the way. And peacocks were not allowed to hunt because it was considered more precious by Indians. Peacocks and elephants weren't hunted, but all the other animals were fair game. They hunted in mass, and it in fact went down in numbers. One of the Jim Corbett brought them back. Now we have Jim Corbett National Park protecting these tigers. Let's talk about death. Yeah, well, they live there. The death in India. When I talk about death in India, these British officers, when they come there, they say, yeah, you're going to like India if you could stand the croaking of the frogs in the nighttime, because they don't hear these things in England. This is like filled with wildlife and sound and very hot. The India's weather is like hot, very hot. That's how it goes. It's not going to be cold. So many of them actually for summers, they can't bear the heat. They will go to the hill stations like Shimla, 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 just a hill station. In fact, between World War I, World War II, they would prefer Kashmir, which is very cool. They will go to the Shimla hill station, but not everybody can go there because it's only the officers, not low-level military guys. And another place they go in the south, we talked about South India today, about Tipu Sultan, is Ooty. The British called it Ooty, which is, I've been there, it's in the state of Tamil Nadu, right? Ooty is called Udagamandalam. That's right, it's a tongue twister for the British, so they call it Ooty. Udagamandalam. They will go, they spend their summers away from the heat of India. And so let me put it in Thomas Hobbes, a British philosopher, who said, he didn't talk about India, but the philosopher said, human beings' life is short, nasty, and brutish. And that's how they felt, the British life is short in British India, even for British officers, because the voyage alone before Suez Canal take months. And when they come there, some people used to say, oh, this officer came, hopefully he will last for 2 monsoons. Monsoon is this rainfall, seasonal rainfall. Hopefully he will last for 2 monsoons. Some of them will die before that. There are many reasons they died, because one is diseases, smallpox epidemic, right? Smallpox, you heard of smallpox. Smallpox is a disease which killed more than 1 billion people around the world over course of time. And smallpox was eradicated only in the 20th century with the effort of the UN, with everyone working together. They completely vaccinated the people, and only humans can carry it, others don't. So humans were passing it around. Now it's not there. Another disease which killed, in fact, like a whole military barracks will be dead, cholera, because the water, through water it transmits to bacteria, and it killed a large number of soldiers. So life in India was not easy. There could be mudslides, and so the mudslides could kill the British. To the point of this whole exercise of learning about the British life in India is to understand that it is, yes, there is this greed aspect that they came, and this is a terror aspect of political and military control of India, but also you have to understand what was the standard of life for the British when they lived in India. And that's why I'm explaining this. They also killed each other by dueling, dueling, D-U-E-L. Like Alexander Hamilton was killed in Weehawken, New Jersey by dueling by Aaron Burr, right? At the time, dueling, so if I insult your honor, you will say, okay, Hill, I need to restore my honor. Give me a chance shot at you. So I will take a pistol, you will take the pistol. Dueling pistols are different, a smooth bore, and we go take 8 paces and shoot at each other until we make a peace or shoot and kill the other one. It's crazy. It was practiced for hundreds of years and then it was gone. So these are the ways the British could end up dead. And the last theme I want to discuss, it's already 15 minutes. The last theme is, did they go back? after they get old? Yeah. And if they did, how do they feel? After living decades of their precious years of their life in India, working for EIC, East India Company, or later for the throne as a soldier, what did they feel? When they went back to England, many of them felt that they don't have enough opportunities because what they did in India, their job, doesn't translate to English economy. There were some who were able to get jobs in academia if they were good in languages, so they were able to teach the next generation of British who are going to India, teach them Tamil, which is my mother tongue, Telugu, and other languages in Oxford and other universities. But in most of the people were not able to get opportunities. Even if they get opportunities, the money they were paid, they cannot have the standard of life they had in India, living in a bungalow and having multiple servants. Remember, they cannot afford to have multiple servants in England. So they felt, why did I come back to this cold place? And most of them don't know me because they spent most of their life there. And so they will stay in India, some of them, for the rest of their lives. They did stay and lived for the rest of their lives in India. And I didn't talk about other than the British, if they had relationship with the Indian woman and had children, they were called Anglo-Indians, and many of them felt, at least when I grew up, I've seen they feel they are higher in the totem pole, not as high as the white British, but in the middle, higher than Indians. And so they are a mix of Indian and British parents, and their dressing, their cuisine, their culture, they had good language abilities. English is a language which even now is a lingua franca of the world and used for job opportunities and others. So they had a better standards of living. So this is the lecture today about the social life of the British in India and Tipu Sultan. So it's about an hour lecture, and I want you to read it and listen to it and answer me the question I'm going to put there. It's the usual question, and I'm looking forward to reading your answers. Good luck.